Hyperus bomani. Yes. Okay, so it's just like this. Like to teach you guys. It's the size is this. It's the one doing pip. So we are doing a species inventory. Species inventory basically means that we are trying to document the biodiversity in this area, how many species we have in this area, and we are focusing on frogs tonight. And we are having some species that we know to be restricted only to this part of the country. Restricted means that they can only be found in this locality. They are quite common here. You can hear them calling, but this is the only place you can find them. So, in many respects, they are really special.
Hello and welcome to Hewale. Our special guest today is Dr. Caleb Ofori-Boateng, a herpetologist with the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research. He is a conservationist and he's going to be telling us about why and how he fell in love with the Atiwa Forest. Hello, Dr. Ofori-Boateng.
Thank you once again for having me.
Tell me about your first encounter with Atiwa Forest.
So I grew up mostly in the savannas, and like most Ghanaians, we see the forest from afar. So the Atiwa Forest can be seen when you are on the Kumasi Accra Road. When you get closer to Linda Door rest stop on the right side of the road, you see this huge tract of forest near Chebi, and that's all that we see and know about the forest. But when you go into the forest, it's a whole new and different experience. So in 2006, I was then a PhD student at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology. And I was invited as part of Conservation International Rapid Assessment Program to study the biodiversity of the Atewa Hills. It was my first time of really spending a night in the forest. I've been to a forest before. I've never spent a night in the forest. And so the experience was very, very remarkable. And as an amphibian biologist, we normally study our species during day and night because that's the better chance to be able to observe them in the wild. Usually after rainfalls, they have a lot of mating activities, which makes it easier to spot these animals. So it was a very wonderful experience. So one thing that you notice if you spend a night in the forest is the sounds. The sounds in the forest obviously is very different from the sounds that you would hear if you are in the house. And I encountered a lot of strange and different sounds, which momentarily, made me very scary because, growing up, we've always been taught that the forest has spirits and ghosts, and our local dialect, they call it motia and all that. So I had these kind of experiences. I remember one particular night was a very important night for us. We descended down from the top of the hill down into the valleys into a stream to look for frogs. And we're there around midnight, and suddenly there was a breeze. The weather changed suddenly, became very, very cold, and all this breeze blowing all over the place. And then there was this creature, like a bird in the night, flying over our head, flapping the wind, and it was midnight, so I was really scared. I felt like, oh, come on, this stories about ghosts and spirits in the forest is really true. And to make matters worse, there was another sound that sounded like a human being in the middle of this forest, whistling, going like, any average Ghanaian will get really scared at some of these encounter experiences. But these fear that we have as people about the forest and being the forest, I later realized all has to do with our lack of knowledge of whatever goes on in the forest. So the bird flapping his wings over our heads was actually an owl, which is a night bird. It flies at night trying to get insects. And what was whistling like a human being was actually a frog. It's called a whistling frog. And that night, we were very privileged to have discovered this frog. We later realized that it's an entirely new species to science. It means that nobody ever has ever seen, described, or named it before. And recently, I was very happy to be among the people who wrote the description of this frog and submitted it for publication. So very soon, that frog is going to have a name. Yeah.
What will
I'm
be?
happy. There's a whole lot to say
Have you
about
decided
Atiwa,
on the
but of
name?
course, sorry.
Have you decided on the name of the frog? I read somewhere you were going to name it after the local.
Yes. Well, you know too much. Yes, I decided to name it after one of the local villages. Usually, until the um, until the paper is published, you're not allowed to share the name because then it nullifies the name. So I can mention the name now, but I named after one of the local communities where I stayed and worked in the Atiwa Forest for several years. They were very receptive and supportive of my conservation efforts. I remember I have evenings where I do a video show, and all that I show them is what I find in the forest and other conservation documentaries. And I spend my Sundays and sometimes Fridays in the churches and the mosques just talking to them about conservation. And they were very supportive. So I felt that the need to, be remembered over the years by naming the frog species after them.
Why are frogs important and why are forests important for our survival?
These are like very basic things that we study in biology, that we breathe in oxygen and then we bring out carbon dioxide. And the cycle is only possible because of plants. So when we breathe out carbon dioxide, this carbon dioxide is used by the plants to prepare their food, in quote. And then in exchange, they also give us oxygen. So the cycle is only complete because we have trees and we have forests. And you will remember that this popular saying that's when the last tree dies, the last man also dies. We take it for granted, but that is very important. Beyond that, there's also things like, so I talk about the extreme where people are going to die because there's no oxygen. But there's a lot of, in-betweens. And some of the in-betweens is the purification of the atmosphere that the forest does for us, for example. So when we go to work and drive our cars, you know, we pollute the environment, which makes it not very healthy to breathe. You may not die immediately, but it will have long-term consequences on your health. When you go and buy your nice dress or your nice shirt, that shirt was produced by a company that probably polluted the atmosphere, produced tons and tons of smoke into the atmosphere. So you might have bought just a shirt, but that shirt costs the atmosphere a lot of pollution, and that pollution comes back to hurt us. So what the forest does is that it takes some of these dangerous pollutants from the atmosphere, and then that allows life to continue. For people who are living near very big forests, it also influences what we call the microclimate or even the local weather. So it affects the amount of rainfall. So for instance, some places like the eastern region and western region, you see that you have a lot more rainfall. So the dry season is minimal compared to when you go to the north, for example. And this makes it possible for people to grow certain plant species like cocoa and all that, you know. So in the absence of the forest, we don't have these things. Also, about 80% of the medicines that have been produced, those discoveries came from plants alone, chemical extracts from plants. were what we're able to use to manufacture a lot of the pharmaceutical drugs. I'm not talking about those that the herbal drugs that we see around. We all know about that. But those that you go on the counter and buy, most of them are, discoveries from plants. So without forests, without trees, all these benefits will go, and we take it for granted. But reality will hit us one day, and I hope that it will not be too late. Now, on the importance of frogs. So these are organisms that don't have scales. They jump around. People think they are slimy, but the amphibians, because most of them require two phases to be able to complete their life cycle. So, unlike humans, we are born here and we live here, but frogs usually will go through a stage where they behave essentially like a fish. And at some point, they will outgrow it and then come on land and spend the rest of their lives on land and return to water to reproduce. Okay. So, we call these animals amphibians, and they are very important for various reasons. In terms of medicine, I'll just give about three examples. There are certain chemicals, okay, that are produced at the back of these amphibian species. And the reason I believe is that it's for their own protection, because sometimes they are in dirty water, they are in all this kind of water system that has lots of bacteria and fungi and all that. And by God's design, okay, they have this ability to produce these chemicals around their body that shield them and protect them. Now, these chemicals vary depending on which amphibian species you are talking about and the kind of ecosystem or environment that it lives in. So, some of these chemicals have been extracted, and one of them have been used to do a painkiller, to develop a painkiller. And that painkiller is 200 times more effective than morphine. So, morphine is a very strong painkiller that is used during surgery and all that. And these drugs from frogs, this chemical is 200 times more potent than morphine. They've also found some of these chemicals to be useful in controlling the growth of cancer cells, for example. And this is just medicine. Recently, actually started in 2005, and there were more papers in 2011 about how some chemicals from these frog species have been used in a laboratory setting to be able to kill the HIV virus in a human infected cell without destroying the human cell. And there's lots of advances being made about how this can be converted into actual medicine that can be used to, be able to provide cure for HIV. The challenge and the problem is that these frogs are going through what we call a global mass extinction. So they are just vanishing from the face of the earth. There's a frog species that was discovered, and they realized that it has a solution to stomach ulcer because it's able to keep the babies in the stomach and protect them without the acid in the stomach destroying the babies. And so it became a very, interesting study because that mechanism can be used to stop stomach ulcer entirely. And just in 2 years of discovering the species got extinct. It was wiped out from the face of the planet. So all that research came to a halt. So the challenge here is that if we don't protect these guys, then we are not able to actually get a full benefits of them. So most of the time, when after rains, just in our communities, if you have a pond or something, you hear a lot of so-called noise, frogs, and all that. And sometimes we think that is even a nuisance. But what we don't know is that these frogs eat millions and millions of larvae, mosquito larvae, that eventually become mosquitoes. And we know that mosquitoes cause malaria, and malaria is one of the highest killers in terms of children under the age of 5, for example. So what I always say that in the absence of these frogs, there will be no natural control, effective control for this malaria causing larvae. And this means that if you are buying malaria drug, maybe once every 3 months, once every 6 months, maybe every week you buy malaria drug. And these services are provided for free by nature through these animals that we do not recognize. We did a survey somewhere by CSR Forestry Research Institute where I work in nearby Kumasi, and there was an explosion of snakes in a certain community. It was a headline news some time back. And when we investigated a little further, we realized that there'd been a lot of um, spraying, chemical spraying over the time because of around the riparian areas. And this has wiped out a lot of, insects and frogs from that particular ecosystem. And this is an area that has some havens that breed snakes in large quantities. And when those little snakes come out, they need to feed and need to feed quickly to grow. And the absence of frogs in the streams and all the insects, they just spread out in search of food and take over the town, you know. So there are also these natural balances where certain organisms serve as food and its intent serves as food to another organism. And when you break that chain, there's always disorder, and then it will cost a lot of, other money or confusion to be able to resolve it. Yeah.
So, how did you feel when you first discovered a new species of frog? That's like a massive achievement.
It is a massive thing. I think that something that biologists will really relate to. You see all these different kind of animals or frogs as you go about your natural day-to-day, normal day-to-day work in the forest, and suddenly you pick one. In some cases, it looks like an ordinary one. You flip it, and you see these whole different patterns, and you realize that you really have something special in your hands. I remember in one such encounter, I couldn't sleep the whole night because I just wanted daylight to be able to see it well, to be sure that I really encountered something special. And then you hold this thing and you begin to have like goosebumps all over your body because you just, encountered this, this miracle, something that, is there, but nobody knew is there. And you're the first person to say it. So it's a very exciting feeling. I'm glad that I've been able to find a few uh, over the span of my career. You remember that there was one that I recently named after my mother, also in the Atewa Hills, the Phrynobatrachus afiabrago, the afiabrago puddle frog. So it's exciting, and I feel that there's actually a lot more, not just for frogs, but in terms of unique species and biodiversity out there in the Atiwa Forest that we know nothing about because we've not looked hard enough.
So, you've said in the past that you fell in love with the forest. What does it mean to fall in love with the forest? Why?
Yeah, to fall. So when people are in love, they like to spend time with each other, isn't it? They like to be where the other person is. They like to, so to speak, communicate and all that. And that's exactly what happens when you fall in love with nature. You always want to be in nature. The thing is that it's just simply amazing is the word to use to explain it. When you're in the forest, you always discovering new things. It's amazing. A little beetle here, a blue and black butterfly flying by, a very cool weather without the need of any air conditioning. The sound that the streams make when they just flow past you. It's just simply amazing. You look down a little bit more, and then you find these tiny fishes, very colorful. You find a frog sitting on a branch. In the evening, you hear them calling just like human beings whistling. You go to this pond, and you are used to finding, frogs and toads that are brown and not so very attractive. But you go out in the forest and you see a black and yellow frog sitting on a branch. You find a green, red, blue frog. You find a frog and it opens its tank and it's completely blue, for example, you know. So it's just like fascinating. You're always discovering stuff. You're always finding stuff. I remember one time I walked through the Atiwa Forest. I came to this zone, yeah, and this zone has like it's like stones instead of dirt, instead of soil. It's all stones. Okay, so it looks like somebody have actually paved the place, in the middle of the forest. And then it has trees that are managed to grow in between these rocks. And those trees have this crown, the branches are form a crown. And as if somebody has just carefully planted this in the middle of the forest. It's just amazing. I don't know how anybody will not fall in love with something like this.
What would you say to the president of Ghana to persuade him not to mine bauxite in the Atiwa Forest?
If I had the opportunity to speak to the president, um, I'm sure that my first task, uh, the first thing that I would like to convey to him is to look at the irreplaceability of what he has or what he manages in the Atiwa Forest. Okay, I'm going to tell him that he has this unique area within Ghana that is not like any other place, not just in Ghana, but within West Africa, and among very few places in the world. So I'm going to convince him how unique that is. And I'm going to stress this, I'm going to buttress my point by telling him about some of the species, landforms, and ecosystems that exist in Atewa that will simply blow his mind, for which he needs to see by himself. I'm going to tell him that I'll be able to pick up a couple of species, including frogs, of course, butterflies, that he will never find anywhere else except in Atewa. I mean, and when I say anywhere else, I mean he will never find it anywhere in the world. And that's where my passion is. There are certain things that money just simply can't buy. Money simply just can't buy. And so when you have that thing, you never want to destroy it. It has to be cherished. The world has to see it. People have to come to Ghana to see it. That's amazing. I find it to be really, really cool. And one of my favorite spots I'm going to take the president is what I call the Frog Orchestra. So when um, you go through the Sajimasi route up onto the summit of the Atiwa Hills. On your right side, there's a place called the White Junction. And when you go a few kilometers, there's a pond, a forest pond. Okay, so there's water actually coming from the rocks on top of the mountain that forms a large pond that rarely dries out. And this pond, you have about half of the frog species occurring at Atiwa, over 20 species coming there at night to sing. And when you hear the beauty of that call, there's no orchestra in the world that compares to that. You just have to go there, close your eyes, and just listen and enjoy. It's nothing like what you hear in Accra. It's just beautiful. Okay? It's just beautiful. The sounds are just amazing because they are all making very different sounds, very unique. Nothing like you've ever heard before. And when it all comes together, it's such a beauty. It's such a beauty. So I'll tell you a personal story which you might have read before. That when I was growing up, my father was into wildlife protection, and my father was very, very close to me. I love my father dearly. And then he died when I was only 7 years. I think he was about 45 years or so when he died. And as a child of 7 years, I felt that, there should be something, there must be something I could do to bring my father back. And I was willing to be very successful, to make all the money in the world, do whatever I can to make sure that I can bring my father back. I felt like he was going to come back somewhere, somehow, but he never did. I grew up to that reality. And that's exactly what extinction is. That's exactly what happens when you have a place like Atiwa Forest, that is so invaluable, that has animals and plants and ecosystems, that you can never, use money to buy. That is so unique, so unique. And then when you lose these things, it doesn't matter when you have billions, you can never restore that habitat. I would never want to lose such a thing, because you make all the money, you can never even create a hectare of Atewa back when you lose it. And that's how unique it is. So all that you can do is to just, respect the place, leave it as it are. If not for anything, at least give it the protection that is so much deserved, for the sake of posterity and for the sake of the world. Because I think that is when you protect, I know I may be going ahead of myself, but when you save a place like Atewa, you are doing the world a favor. Whereas when you destroy it, you are being really very ruthless, not just to Ghana, but to the planet.
Some would argue that despite all that you've said about protecting the Atiwa Forest, that Ghana needs to mine the bauxite in the forest in order to make real the dream of industrialization. Manufacturing aluminium or transforming bauxite into aluminium in order to produce products like cars is vital to the development of the nation. And it's a dream that Ghana has held for decades, since the time of Kwame Nkrumah. Is it possible that this could be Ghana's last chance to industrialize and Atewa could hold the key?
Thank you. Very interesting question, very interesting argument. I'm not an economist, but I'll say just two things out of my heart. And one is that thanks to a study that has been done by some of the world best experts, including some of the best we have in this country, the best we have in the Netherlands, I've done an economic valuation of the Atiwa Forest and its ecosystem. And that report has proven that in a space of 20 years, we will be able to make more money protecting the Atiwa Forest and still have the forest there and the beauty and the nature and all that it represents, as opposed to mining it now, cashing in and never having it again.
Why would we have more money from the forest than from mining the forest for the bauxite?
Let me give some background. What we do is that to value nature and ecosystem, okay, there are very advanced techniques developed by the International Union for the Conservation of Nature and a lot of value of ecosystem and forest. And they look at it in various ways. For example, if Atewa is not there and Wager is not getting water through the Densu River, how much is it going to cost us to get the people of Accra water? So now this becomes the value, economic value of the Atewa Hills. How much carbon, or in terms of atmospheric purification, is the Atewa Forest doing right now? And right now, carbon is a commodity that is sold in the international market. You can quantify the amount of carbon that is being saved by your forest and go out there and sell it to a company that is producing carbon into the atmosphere. And they will pay the government for just keeping the forest. You look at things like tourism. If this was converted into a national park, we have some cable cars on the fringes, and this one was bringing money. How much money would the government and the people get? When you put all this together and many more, you arrive at a value in terms of money, is billions of dollars. And then you can now quantify what the economists think that they are going to get from the mining of the reserve for aluminium. And when you put those together, you realize that within the space of just 2 decades, we can make all that money that aluminium is promising to give us. And then beyond that 20 years, we're still going to have Atiwa Forest that will continue to bring more money and benefit other people. So the economics just simply speaks for itself, you know. So if that has not been done, then probably I'll just be talking out of my conviction and love for the forest. But the economics is very clear. And two, Atiwa is irreplaceable. There are other areas in Ghana that has bauxite, understand that can be mined for about 200 years. You know, that has a lot of deposits somewhere in the country that does not have such unique biodiversity. These places, I don't support destruction of biodiversity anyway, but if you have to choose between the two, there's still option to get some that kind of immediate economic benefits without destroying that one thing that is just irreplaceable.
Do we still have hippos in the Atiwa Forest?
There are no hippos in Atiwa Forest, but that brings in a very important discussion, probably for another day. Is how, the debate is focused on bauxite mining and gold mining, but on the quiet side, there's a silent threat and killer, which is hunting. That is causing what we scientists call local extinction. Extinction is when a species or animal or plant species ceases to exist on the surface of the planet. So in the past, we had leopards, bongos. Bongos are very, very beautiful antelopes in the reserve. Yeah, if you talk to the hunters, they'll tell you. We have hawks, forest hawks. Forest hawks are like very huge pig species, very huge, very, very, very different, very charismatic. And all these species have been hunted to extinction from the Atiwa Forest. I work there. Sometimes you walk for hours, if not the whole day, and you not see a single large animal because they've been so hunted that they are afraid to come near human beings. And their population has become so small that it's very difficult to encounter them. So that's something that we say it's not just leaving Atiwa as it is, but improving the protection, converting it to a national park where people cannot go in and hunt, and then bringing in tourism infrastructure, making sure we are assessing money for carbon and all that is what will do the job and not just leaving it as it is. So yes, we don't have hippos, unfortunately.
Should Ghana be doing more to invest in research and development that maximizes our forests in a sustainable way? And are we neglecting our most valuable resource, which is our scientists?
You just hit the nail right on the head out there. I'm a scientist, all right, with a government-funded institution, and I speak for myself, not the official position of CSR. Um, and I'll say two things there, but one is that lots of our scientists have done a lot of great work, incredible research. That one is not being communicated, and that is just sitting themselves because nobody needs it. You know, it's there. They've done lots of livelihood assessment. We have some very fantastic scientists here at CSR, and they've done some incredible work. You know, but these works just stay on the shelves because it doesn't look like the policies demanded. The government want our research. And the second thing is that research must be demand driven. The government must be willing that we need solutions to this area for which we have devoted some money. And I tell you, there are some very brilliant scientists in this country who can do that research. The thing is, if the government said that he wanted somebody in Ghana to develop solar cars and he made the money available, trust me, there are brilliant scientists in Ghana who will do it. So it's more about also about government priorities. Now we do a lot of research that is dictated by the foreign world, because the European Union are interested in finding more about how carbon will affect the tropical ecosystem and they make money. And so we apply, we get the money and do the research and give the results to them. That result does not benefit Ghana. But if the Ghana government is giving us this money to resolve these issues, then we'll do that research for the government. And then the government can then use that findings to improve things for the country.
And on that note, I think we will end the discussion there. I have a recording of the forest sounds that you talked about, the orchestra of frogs, which I'll play at the end of this discussion so our viewers can get a taste of what you were talking about. But thank you very much, Dr.
Well, thank you for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Caleb Ofori of CSIR. Thank you.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye.